Welcome to The Explainer. The story of Christmas is one of the most familiar in the entire world. But what if the timing of that event, down to the exact moment, wasn't an accident at all? We're about to dive into a source that makes a really compelling case for why that specific point in history was chosen. So, you gotta wonder, right? Was this just some historical coincidence? Or was it, as our source argues, a meticulously planned event? The whole argument kicks off with this fascinating concept that kind of reframes how we look at all of history. Okay, so the entire argument from our source really hinges on this one biblical idea, the fullness of time. The core concept here is that history wasn't just a random series of events, it was actually unfolding according to a divine schedule, all leading up to one specific perfect moment. And this one verse right here is the key. The author uses it to argue that the world had to be perfectly prepared. We're talking culturally, linguistically, and politically for this one event to happen. So, what did that preparation actually look like? Well, according to the source, it involved shaping entire empires and languages to create the absolute perfect conditions for a new universal message to travel fast and take root everywhere. And the scale of this thing is just staggering. We are talking about a 4,000-year runway. According to the source, everything from the selection of Abraham to the rise and fall of massive empires, every single step was a crucial piece of the puzzle, setting the stage for what it calls the preeminent hour of history. So this 4,000-year plan, it all culminates in three critical factors coming together at once. First, you had a universal language, Koinē Greek, so the message could be understood pretty much everywhere. Second, a unified Roman Empire, which gave you the peace and the roads for that message to travel. And third, the Jewish diaspora, a people who had already spread the idea of one true God across the known world. It was literally the perfect storm for a new idea to just explode. Okay, so we've looked at the massive world stage setup, but now the source zooms way in to the intense personal story of Mary and Joseph, and it argues that their faith was tested in the most extraordinary way imaginable. Now, to really get the drama here, you have to understand what betrothal meant back then. This was not your modern-day engagement, not even close. It was a legally binding contract, as serious as marriage itself. So Mary's pregnancy wasn't just a social scandal. It was a full-blown legal crisis, with potential life or death consequences. This put Joseph in a totally impossible position. The text calls him a just man, and his first instinct was a merciful one, to end the betrothal quietly, to protect her. But that plan gets completely thrown out the window by a divine command he receives in a dream. And the text puts Joseph's internal conflict right up against Mary's response. It's a huge contrast. It points out that she immediately calls herself a handmaid, which the source translates as a bond slave, basically someone with no rights of their own. It's presented as this act of total, absolute surrender to a divine plan she couldn't possibly understand yet. So, with the personal crisis handled, at least for the moment, an external force enters the story. A decree from the most powerful man in the world, Caesar Augustus, now forces the couple to travel to Bethlehem, which just so happens to be the prophesied birthplace of the Messiah. Okay, now this is a really fascinating detail. The source argues that our modern image, the hotel with the grumpy innkeeper, is probably all wrong. The original Greek word used is katalama, which suggests a much more humble setting, like a public shelter or a simple enclosure for shepherds and their flocks. Think about what that means. It totally reframes the whole scene, making it even more humble. They weren't turned away from a comfortable inn, they were turned away from the most basic public lodging you can imagine. Their only option left was a place meant for animals. So, while the birth itself was in the humblest setting possible, the source points out that its announcement was anything but. In fact, it was a celestial spectacle. It starts out quietly, at least by cosmic standards. A single angel appears to some shepherds out in the fields. Can you imagine the shock of that moment? Just a lone, brilliant figure in the dead of night? But that was just the opening act. And then, suddenly, that one angel is joined by what the source calls a multitude of the heavenly host. The sky just fills with this celestial army, transforming a quiet, dark field into the stage for an absolutely unimaginable spectacle. And to prove this incredible vision was real, The shepherds were given a very specific three-part sign. They weren't just told to go find a baby, but to find a baby in this highly unusual and specific situation. And get this, even the swaddling clothes have a deeper meaning according to the source. This wasn't just about keeping the baby warm. It was part of a traditional Jewish rite, a symbolic vow the parents made to God, promising to raise the child on a straight and righteous path. But the story doesn't just stop in the manger. The source makes a big point that the child's very first days were immediately marked by a strict adherence to Jewish law and tradition. So on the 8th day, just as required by the law of Moses, two critical events happen. The circumcision officially brings him into the covenant of Israel, and he is formally given the name that the angel had commanded, Jesus, which, as the source notes, means Jehovah is salvation. So when you step back, the picture this source paints is one of a profound paradox. On one hand, you have 4,000 years of history, the rise and fall of empires, and a sky filled with an army of angels. And on the other hand, a teenage mother, a confused husband, and a baby lying in an animal's feeding trough. The argument is that this massive contrast isn't a contradiction. It's the entire point. It's a story of cosmic significance delivered in the humblest package imaginable.